Welcome back, everybody, to this bonus episode for Drunk Bible Study 109, the one where we meet Bathsheba. Yeah. So we did 4 chapters in this one, and there was a lot of different events that happened. So we had a number of things to cover. And before we get to Bathsheba, something that I looked up was the thing, I don't know if you even remember this. This happened way early on in the episode, was when David defeated the Moabites and then did that thing of having them all lie down and then measuring them out with like measuring tape.
How could I forget?
Yeah, I know.
It's pretty weird.
Yeah, pretty weird, right? So here's what was interesting is that, so on the Hermeneutics Stack Exchange, which is a website I found that's fascinating for this sort of thing. So someone asked the question, was the use of a measuring line literal or symbolic in 2 Samuel 8? And, you know, they talk about the verse. That this one here is from the New King James, which is, then he defeated Moab, forcing them down to the ground. He measured them off with a line. With 2 lines, he measured off those to be put to death, and with 1 full line, those to be kept alive. So the Moabites became David's servants and brought tribute. So he's basically asking, what's the deal? Is this metaphorical that he killed 2/3 of them? Did he actually do this with a measuring line? Whatever. And the responses were all just kind of like, they're sort of like, the question of why he did it is interesting. But the question of is it literal or not? Like, don't be an idiot. Of course it's literal. Like, everyone was just sort of like, that was a stupid question. However, this other part of it is interesting. So
wait a minute. It is literal.
It is literal. He, like, apparently because of the wording or whatever, it's most people, it seems, interpret this as like literally a measuring tape.
Why is that a stupid question?
I
it's
don't
a
know.
legitimate question. These
are people on Hermeneutics Stack Exchange. They're like in this world in a way that we're not. We're on like naive Yokels Stack Exchange. You know, a very different sort of crowd there.
Yeah, okay.
No one was mean, but they were all just like, no, obviously this is literal. But one thing, they talked about a couple things. So one is that they went back to talking about Balaam. Remember our buddy Balaam with the talking ass and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So one of Balaam's prophecies from back in Numbers said, again, this is King James Version. It says, there shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab and destroy all the children of the Sheth. So the idea is that then here, this is like the fulfillment of that prophecy of David being the star that comes out of Jacob. And I guess maybe the scepter is a reference to kings, that he's a king that rises out of Israel and smites the corners of Moab.
Well, okay, and the star too, because as we will talk about later, the star makes an appearance, the star of David in various renditions of the story done on film.
Right.
But I was like, okay, where does this actually come from? Because I know what the Star of David is, and I've seen it. You know, some of my Jewish friends wear it, but I haven't heard them like specifically speak about it in the David story yet, unless I missed that.
Well, yeah. So I did actually do a little bit of research on this too, that I was thinking of going into next week, but we could talk about it now if you're into it.
Okay.
And that's the Star of David, right? Which became this Jewish symbol.
Yeah.
From what I can tell, it didn't start showing up in manuscripts and like stone monuments and things until like the 3rd or 4th century AD. So hundreds of years after.
Quite a ways afterwards, huh?
Though supposedly the shape may have resembled the shape of King David's shield, although I have not found any sources that back that up.
That he would have the spiky shield?
I guess,
cool.
Yeah. But it does seem like pretty much everything I'm seeing, like in the time of King David, it would not have been a symbol that was used around. Maybe, but it's clear, like in the movie depictions, that it's just, they're like, people know this is the Star of David, so we're going to put it on David.
Exactly.
Right?
That's right. What it feels like, honestly.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
All right.
So anyway, that's something I found out about that. But what I was going to say about the Balaam, though, is the other deal is that the Moabites were the ones who hired Balaam to curse Israel, and then he didn't.
Yeah.
So that's also like related to this same story, that he kind of predicted this while being hired by the Moabites was interesting. And then some Bible commentaries talk about this thing of slaughtering just 2/3 of the army as opposed to all of them as being an indicator of David's like mercifulness. And I'm just like, okay, no. First of all, we remember when Saul tried to be merciful to a kingdom that Yahweh told him to kill. That was what broke them up. That Yahweh broke up with him over that. So like,
true.
I don't buy it. And then 2, it's like, okay, then other people are like, yeah, well, but then it shows that he thought it was valuable to keep 1/3 of them alive to keep paying tribute to him. And I'm like, okay, that sounds maybe more like the David we've come to know. But then I also think about this and I started imagining it, and I like, content warning again, I guess our show's just full of them. But if you imagine this, right? Like this one army has beaten this other one. This big army has beaten you. And now they force all of you to lie down on the ground and line you up and measure you off. And every 2/3 of you kill. And then every 1/3 they spare.
Yeah.
That is messed up. That is some like super horrible psychological torture.
Yeah.
And so I feel like anytime you try to make any one people always the good guy, or always the bad guy, really, you're wrong,
Well, I guess I want to say, like, David did this. It was like
did this,
his thing. Yeah. Not like an entire people. It was like a leader deciding to do this. And again, another decision on the part of someone whose power was corrupted by just being like the most powerful man in the world besides freaking Yahweh.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that does maybe help a little bit is that I did find that apparently in Jewish tradition, there's a little more to the story, and that's that the king of Moab murdered David's parents.
Really?
That just didn't make it into the Bible, but supposedly that's part of Jewish tradition, so that might have justified him being more horrible to the Moabites. I still don't think that's justification for it, but that's at least, adds some depth to that plot.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's very specific. Okay, so I looked up cutting off beards and garments down the middle, even to their buttocks.
Right.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to remember when this happened, but yeah, Hanan took David's servants and did this to them. So we were kind of wondering, like, why is this such a big deal? What do they exactly mean by cutting it off? Cutting off both of these things. So apparently, to cut off one's beard is a really, really bad thing. It says that it's regarded by the Arabs is what this says, which I have a problem with. They also use the word Oriental in a lot of these things, which is also a big problem.
Okay.
But yeah, they basically say that this is an indignity equal to flogging and branding. The loss of their long garments, so essential to someone's dignity, was no less insulting than that of their beards. So, loss of their long garments and their beards. And basically, yes, that they cut off the garments and that nobody wore undergarments. So they were literally like leaving it all to hang out if they cut it off at the buttocks. So I am assuming it did happen horizontally.
Yeah, it seems
like
that way.
At the buttocks and then down. And so everything was hanging out. The beards were cut off in half, which is very sad because they took a long time to grow them. And this is not a good thing. It's a sad, bad thing.
Did you find anything about how long the beards would have been at that time? Because I remember I didn't know how long it would take to grow back because I don't know how long these beards are.
Yeah, not specifically. I'm assuming they all had varying degrees of long beards. It wasn't just like everyone had this specific type of length of beard.
Okay, all right, yeah, I suppose. But
Yeah,
just, you
but
know,
I'm not
like
sure.
if the style at the time was like big long beards.
Ooh,
or
I
if it
didn't see
was
that specifically. I
just
think that
some-
it is supposed to be a fairly long beard.
Right.
Yeah,
So yeah, that'd take a long time to grow back for sure.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it was not good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he might compel them to bear a part in their mourning, and that such a way was usual with them but forbidden to Israelites, which I guess cutting off one's beard is forbidden to Israelites, which is interesting.
Right. Wasn't there something about that? About like cutting off your hair back from like Exodus or Deuteronomy or something?
Yeah.
About that being Yahweh saying, don't you do that. Other people do that, but don't you do it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think I remember that in some way. I'm not totally sure of the specifics, but yeah. Oh, interesting. This says like great offenders are those who are shaven entirely. That's really interesting. It's a heavy punishment, one of the heaviest punishments one could inflict upon them. Wow.
But but then when you like for the Nazarene vows,
Nazarites.
the Nazarites, they would shave their head when they join and never cut their hair again until their watch has ended, and then they would shave it again. So that's interesting. And that wasn't like dishonorable discharge. That was like, I've served my term that I vowed and now I'm done. So that's interesting. Huh.
Well,
Maybe that was like the one exception.
yeah, perhaps it was. But no, apparently, yes, they were going to look real weird, and people probably leered at them.
Oof.
And made them feel bad about themselves.
I mean,
because-
David couldn't even look at them. He was like,
I
you stay in
know.
this other town until it grows back. I can't
Exactly.
Can't even see you.
They were exposed in more ways than one, is basically what happened. So it's a big
Yikes.
deal and no fun at all.
So last week, I delighted your senses with a clip from the 1985 King David film starring Richard Gere. Yes, you remember this?
they
Oh,
were-
I remember.
they were
How could I
delighted.
forget?
A half-naked Richard Gere dancing around
Yes.
on a
So-
cool set.
I highly recommend you all go look it up.
Well, okay, we're going to watch a little bit more, or we have watched a little bit more from that film. But first, I found this really funny review from 1985 in the Florida Sun Sentinel. I found an archived article online reviewing this film. The reviewer doesn't like the film, does not think it's a good film.
Yeah,
And
it didn't do well.
did not do well, did not wow anybody. And this is my favorite part of this review. When David brought the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem, the Bible says he danced before the Lord with all his might. Why did Gere have to strip down to a loincloth? Why did he have to do a skipping, stumbling, shuffling parody of a dance?
I mean,
he won't
that's
make
true.
anyone forget Rita Hayworth. Anyway, that was it.
I don't know. I think that's a little bit harsh. I actually thought his depiction was... I think it worked with the way I read the story, at least. That
Yes, I would agree, of David just kind of freestyling it and being happy and stuff
it's more
like
of an
that.
ecstatic dance than a choreographed dance.
Yes.
Yeah, like what kind of dance is this going to be? Come on, like it's going to be an interesting, strange dance.
I just thought it was more weird of him doing a weird, interesting, ecstatic dance and no one else is into it. No
That
one
is
else
true.
is dancing. No one else is clapping or cheering. Everyone's just like, yes, yes. Like that's what makes his dance even weirder, I
That's
think.
true. Yeah.
That it's not like he's caught up in like the collective joy of the crowd. He's just kind of making it up.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
sure.
so before recording, I mean, we reached the very famous David and Bathsheba scene of historical import.
Right.
And so,
Bathing on the roof one. Yep.
yes, the bathing on the roof. So we watched two clips of how different biblical films have chosen to tackle this particularly sexy scene. And like, I think like legitimately potentially sexy scene for the Bible, at least, before David sends for her and, probably, has sex with her against her will or whatever. But we watched the Gregory Peck version of the King David story. It's actually a film just called David and Bathsheba.
Huh.
Oh, so it's just about them. Okay.
Yeah, that was
Interesting.
from 1951. That film was made. So what did y'all think?
51.
Yes. Yes.
I thought many things.
Yeah, I
Tell me
thought
what
some
you thought
things
about
too. What did you
their-
think, Em?
Their coverage of this scene.
Well, okay, first of all, what
Can
annoyed...
you paint us a word picture of what happens, what you see in the scene,
Essentially, yeah, so she's in like a tub like you see Geralt of Rivia in when you watch The Witcher.
Okay.
Like, it's kind of it's, you know, just like a wooden tub. It's very old feeling. But the thing that struck me immediately was that these two women of color were bathing this white woman, which is just 100% ridiculous.
Yeah, there was that of like, we're going
annoying.
to cast white people to play these Middle Eastern people, but we're still going to make sure that the servants / slaves are
Right.
black women.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that really angered me from the beginning. And then the second thing that was maybe a little surprising was just Gregory Peck's portrayal of looking at her. First of all, he had like what seemed to be like popcorn or something that he was munching on as he was walking up. He like had some sort of snack in his hand and he was eating it. So this was like, you know, his Saturday night film or something that he was watching. And he just, the camera just stays on him for a while.
Just
He
staring.
stares.
Yeah.
He's
For
just
so long.
yeah, he's just looking. He's just staring. So that happened. And yeah, I mean, Bathsheba seems to be chilling. She doesn't really notice him in this one. Not like in the Richard Gere one. But did I leave anything out, Jace? Did you see anything? That was
No, well,
interesting.
the other thing that just jumped out to me, being that this is, I guess, from the 50s, is that the whole thing takes place behind like a little privacy wall,
Yeah.
which, like, ironically, maybe makes more sense if you're bathing on your rooftop that's like open to the world and there's buildings that are taller than yours, that you would have that. But it was very chaste. You know, it was like, it was implied that she was naked because she was taking a bath and towels were involved, but like you saw no skin at all,
Nothing.
really. Like literally from the
Nothing.
neck up is all you saw. So it was very, very sort of puritanical and chaste in the way that it depicted this.
Yeah, so apparently all that he was seeing that he was excited by was her face, I
Or her
guess. And just
hair.
maybe
She had some
her
kind of
hair.
big hair. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe he was titillated by the idea of her taking a bath.
Yeah, yeah.
But that was about it. That was interesting. And it was contrasted greatly by the second Richard Gere scene,
Yeah.
which was all tits all the time.
Right. Emily, can you maybe paint us a word picture of that? Of the
Okay,
Richard Gere one?
so Richard Gere in all of his glory. Which one was the one? No, it was the first one that he had the big Star of David on. This one, he didn't have the big Star of David on him. He was in robes. It was
He
very
was just
dark.
kind of
very
in the dark.
It was all three white women this time, the servants and Bathsheba. And she had like some short cropped hair. I didn't dig her hair as much as the other lady. But she was 100% nude and you saw everything, which was surprising. And they were just kind of like throwing water on her and kind of like scrubbing everything all over.
I think it was oil.
And, oh, it was oil? Okay. Yeah.
Oh,
And
okay.
that was that. And she did look at David and he did look at her. It wasn't just a one-way look.
Yeah.
She was also looking.
But yeah, was super naked.
Her boobies
it was
were
pretty,
out.
It was a pretty arousing scene. Definitely the filming of that one was a lot more leaning into the sexy
Yes.
than the other one. Yeah.
It was
for sure.
very titillating from a more like literal standpoint, not just from a, oh, this might be interesting in my head standpoint.
I guess I'd be curious, like, for moviegoers of the time,
Mm-hmm.
whether that also would have been, like, whether that 1950s one would have also been very titillating, because even that just implied bathing was a big thing, or would people even at the time have been like, ugh, yeah, this story was sexier when I read it in the Bible. And that's saying something. If anyone ever says that about your movie.
Yeah, I don't know.
For the people who are in our Drunk Bible Study fans and fellowship group, I will post a link to the 1951 David and Bathsheba scene because that's nicely cut on YouTube. But the other scene I could only find in a Spanish language version of the stream, so I'm not going to post that because it's like it was like the whole
Yeah,
film.
I don't believe YouTube would allow that on its premises because it was completely uncensored in every way.
Right, that's true. YouTube wouldn't allow nudity like that. That's true.
No, YouTube would not. So, yeah. So that was fun. Not that we recommend the 1985 Richard Gere film entitled David. Is it just David?
King David.
King David. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it, but, you know, it was a fun scene, and the other scene was fun too, so maybe just watch those two, and then that's enough for you. And we will see you all next week, getting maybe perhaps more into the story of Bathsheba. Maybe she'll be clothed this time. We'll see. And we'll see you then.
Yeah.